Okay, folks, we're live on Facebook. It's good to see everybody. I know we can't see everybody's face, but I'm sure they can hear us. And what we've done is actually muted your microphones, and so there's no interruption, but we'll probably get to a time of interaction a little bit later. I've got my dad on with me. My dad's been joining with us most weeks. All the time we've actually been doing these Zooms. So, and my dad and I are actually going to be sharing this morning, which I'm really excited about. Just before we do that, I want to mention just a couple of things. Firstly, is that on Monday, I'm actually doing a Zoom call or a Zoom meeting with Stephen Hill. A lot of you know Stephen Hill. He's a friend of ours from Northern Ireland. He's got a beautiful Irish accent, and him and I are going to be sharing, but that's going to be at a different time. It's actually going to be at 4 p.m. East Coast time, USA, which is 9 p.m. in the evening in the USA. We're actually doing that because of, we're trying to fit as many people as possible. So that's going to be like a one-off Zoom call on Monday with Stephen Hill. We've been talking over the last few weeks actually about doing it. So today I've got my dad with me, and we've been talking all week about what we can talk about, what we can share about. And I just want to kick this off just for a few minutes, and it's probably going to be a little bit different than the way we normally do things. And I just want to share a little bit and just lay a little bit of a platform. But one of the core topics on an A school that we talk about is the heart of a son. And the unique thing about what we share when we actually share this particular subject is the relationship of the son to the father. Not vice versa, but the relationship of the son to the father. And I think certainly over the last 10 to 15 years, my relationship with my dad, you can call him John. I don't have the right to call him John. I'll just call him Dad. Has really grown and developed. And I think I can honestly say that he's one of my best friends. Every single day we actually talk together on FaceTime, and the conversation normally starts with a riddle or a joke or something that I've got to solve, and so we often start our conversation like that. But certainly over the last year, in our conversations, I really believe that we really got quite close. And for me, that's been a real blessing and an honor. And I'm so thankful that I have the relationship that I do with my father. And we both know that God has worked in both our lives. And as a consequence of that, I really believe that's helped really heal and cement a healthy, strong relationship. And I believe in some ways it mirrors our relationship with our father. We all know that we're inadequate. We've got stuff in our lives that we're imperfect. But I'm so thankful that I found my dad, and I know that he's found me as well. So that's a really beautiful thing. And in that, I really believe it mirrors the father-son relationship. So what I've asked my dad to do, and we've talked over this, I really want him just to share his story and to share his heart, so you can hear his heart. I'm not going to let you know his age. If he wants to let you know, he can. But I can tell you he's the oldest person on the Zoom today, and he's a lot of fun. So over to you, Dad. Just feel free, and it's great to have you share, and let's just see where this takes us this morning. God bless you. So if you could just. Okay, you're right. You're muted.
Well, if you want me to speak, I'd better do that, hadn't I? Yes. Okay. It really is a privilege, and I suppose I never thought I'd have my son introducing me, but it's great. And I want to just underline what Andy said. We have a great relationship, an almost unbelievably close relationship, intimate relationship, and that's really great. Right, it's a long story, and it's an unfinished story, but I better just fill you in a few details about my childhood. I was born in industrial city, Manchester, and looking back, and I wasn't aware of this at the time, I think my mother must have felt very inadequate in many, many areas. I didn't suffer any kind of physical abuse, any physical neglect, but I think I suffered a lot of emotional neglect and an emotional, probably rejection. And my mother was really felt inadequate. And I remember one of the favorite things she said, if I happened to be at home from school, was, get out from under my feet. It sticks with me to this day, as if somehow or other I was a bit of a problem, I don't think I was particularly naughty, but, I was just a kind of problem to her. My father, I could get close to him at times, but you had to choose your moments, and he was quite austere. Now, our family was complicated by the fact that my mother had two maiden sisters who, I don't know whether they saw my mother as a bit inadequate, but they kind of took me under their wing a lot. And I suppose they really spoilt me, they indulged me. And so there were these three kind of figures operating in my life. My schooling was interrupted by the war and being evacuated, and then being educated in schools that really weren't fit to be called schools. And by the time I was a teenager, I was very insecure. I used to do a lot of daydreaming and fancy that I was this or that. Interestingly, it was always somebody who was strong and silent and secure, which probably tells you something. Left school at just over 14 with nothing to show at all. And I think my father had seen me as a kind of failure, at least academically. I had a casual contact with the church. And when I was about 16 and a quarter, I was invited to go to a baptismal service. There was a couple of girls being baptized. And secretly, I was rather sweet on one of these girls. Nothing significant had happened, but I was rather smitten with her. So I went along. Wasn't a big congregation. There wasn't anything exceptional about the service. But when the pastor challenged the congregation afterwards, it was as if the Lord was speaking to me. I struggled to put it into words other than I had a tremendous sense that it was he and I regret to this day not actually get up and going out. But I went home that night, knelt by my bed, and I cried. And that was something really out of the ordinary for me. I cried. I think I just sensed that I was loved and accepted. I can't really put any more words to it than that, but it was a very deep, very profound experience. And certainly when off to work the following day, I sensed that I was changed. I sensed that I was different. And that kind of continued on. I was in quite a loving fellowship, and they nurtured me and so on. And I found, one thing I found, that I got friends. I don't think I'd ever had many friends as a child, and I suddenly found I got a lot of friends, that people were prepared to sit and talk to me, almost always older people. But I suddenly found I had friends. I suddenly found that I was accepted and indeed encouraged. And it wasn't long before people let me loose in pulpits. Now, I'm not actually sure how clear the message was, but they let me loose anyway. And it wasn't awfully long before people were kind of saying, well, what about ministry, and so on. But among all the kind of things that changed, my whole academic attitude changed. And I suddenly found myself, I I've never been bright academically, but I suddenly found myself taking on things academically and studying in a way that I'd never studied before. Now, those are the days when people in our country had to do a couple of years national service. And although this talk about ministry had been going on, I felt that I needed to do national service for a couple of reasons. Well, one reason in particular, that it was a kind of test, that if I still sensed some sense of call afterwards, that's okay. The other thing was I resolved to go in the Navy. Everybody said, no one goes in the Navy. You'll probably go in the Army. A few lucky ones go in the RAF. No one goes in the Navy. I went in the Navy. I think God was on my side, you know, a lot of times without me knowing it. And I opted to go into, to be what you probably call a medical nurse now. And I did that for one reason. That one of the fears my mother had communicated to me was a fear of hospitals. And I had this sense of fear about hospitals and about things medical. And I actually deliberately chose to go to be a nurse in order to try and challenge that and try and work it through. Well, I did a couple of years in the Navy. I never went on a ship. I only went on what the Navy calls stone wall frigates, which are really bases on land. Got out and was accepted for training in a Bible/theological college. Again, the fact that I hadn't got much academic stuff behind me, it was still a bit of a mystery why they accepted me, but they did. And I did 3 years there. Sorry, 4 years there, and then went off and did a pastorate in a little Derbyshire village with a little branch church. I wasn't used to village life, but we survived, and then moved on to my second pastorate. I'm skipping over these pretty quickly, but looking back, I'm sure I was ministering out of my mind, that I wasn't ministering out of my spirit. I'd been taught, I think, in my training, you know, to be very, well, objective was the term that they used, and to really play down anything subjective to do with what was going on in here and so on. Then I went off to my third church, and while I was there, I got caught up with some people who were looking at how groups behave. Won't go into all the details, except to say that they're running conferences, and they were running them in conjunction with Leicester University. And I went off to one of these conferences, and it was at this conference I had a dream. Now, what was singular about it is that I can't recall dreaming very much then. Dream a lot more now than I did then. And it was a very vivid dream. I was on the roof of the house where I was brought up. I didn't see the front, but I knew it was our house. And somehow or other, I'd gone onto the roof and I was hanging on with both hands onto the ridge tiles. And I was slipping. And I knew that if I slipped and slipped, a two-story house, you know, I'd come a cropper if I actually slipped and went over the guttering and down into the garden. Of course, the dream ended before I landed, so I never knew whether I survived or not. But it was really powerful, this dream. It really shook me. So much so that we were working in small groups of 12s. I shared that story the following day. And about 15 or 20 years later, I accidentally bumped into somebody on that group. And almost the first thing they said to me was, "Oh, I remember you telling me that dream." So it either made a big impact on him or I made a big impact when I told it. But looking back, I think it's really significant. I think the Lord was really saying to me that there's stuff, John, that you're hanging on to. There's a history that you're clinging on to, and that you need to be shut of it. It need to be gone. It need to be dealt with. It needs to be off. I ought to have said that when I left college, we got married. I think in the first 10, 20, perhaps more years than that, Dorian had to cope with me having two things. One thing, I had a temper that I could always control in public, but at home it came out. And I know once she said to me early on that that had taken her by surprise, and what that did to her emotionally, I'm not sure. The second thing was that if I didn't get my way, I could sulk. I was the world's best sulker. I could sulk for days on end, and so on. But I think that dream, and I wasn't conscious at the time, but I think that dream kind of challenged me to try and get myself sorted out. I was aware that most of the stress in the family came from me rather than from Dorian. We had 3 children, but there was no more stress there than is normal with 3 children, and 4 when the 4th arrived. So I kind of set off on a pilgrimage. I did some studies, I did courses, I did all kinds of things. And then we were living at Bradford at the time. From Bradford, we moved to Eastbourne in '73 to pastor another church, a church where at 40 odd, I was the youngest member, and where they were saying they wanted the church built up and young people coming, all that kind of talk. And the Lord still was kind of nudging me, nothing dramatic, but nudging me. I had a very vivid experience listening to a television program of all things, which displayed on this television program a town in our country, Luton, and it featured in the program a hospital chaplain. I'd done that. I'd been a hospital chaplain, industrial chaplain. I'd done a wee bit of that. A guy who had a huge church and he was trying to rationalise it. And my pastorate in Bradford was dominated by this great building and how we could cope with it. So I identified with all 3. And then finally, a guy came on where it was just introducing him to worship. I now know it was Colin Urquhart. I didn't at the time. And after finishing the program, I said, well, there's only one of those guys that was alive. There's only one of them who was real, and that was Colin Urquhart. And the rest of them were just, inverted commas, doing a job. And although I was in contact with people who had a very real spiritual life, Edmund Heddle, and some of you will have heard of his name, was one of them. I always kind of put it down as, well, some people are made like and some people not. But very slowly, not dramatic, but very slowly, the Lord started to kind of, I don't know, chip away at the iron wall, the stone wall I'd put up. He started to chip away at it, and I started to think about things and reflect on things. And I can't put a finger on this. I can't date it. But after I've been in Bradford for something like 8-10 years, I found that some of the gifts of the Spirit, that I was talking in tongues. I had no kind of experience, and I had allowed myself to have a bit of exposure to people who were in that kind of place. And so it went on, it kind of just grew. And one of the offsprings was the way the church grew, and also the way we went into healing, where we went into ministry. And I suppose I was beginning to try and operate, not just at the mind level, the head level, but the heart level. But it was still all very new and all very strange. And then it was only about 3 or 4 years before I was due to retire, I had a sabbatical. I went on this sabbatical, and one of the things I did was to go on a 9-week course that was run by LL Ministries under the title, was it Mission, Evangelism and Healing? And I think secretly I was drawn to the mission because my heart had always been for mission. I'd always been eager to kind of engage with people and to bring people into the kingdom and that kind of stuff. And I went there. Now, that hit me. I was being introduced to stuff. I knew the biblical stuff, the background, but I was being invited to see it a different way. And it took me about 2 weeks on this course just for the penny to suddenly drop. I'd gone there hoping that I'd find some kind way of dealing with the people we had to deal with in the church. And because it had been blessed, the Lord had brought in people with huge problems. I mean, I used to pray, Lord, let the next one come without any baggage, but there were masses of them. I was floundering and so on. And then the penny dropped. It wasn't me finding some way of dealing with them. It was me getting myself sorted out. That I needed, something. And it sounds almost inane, really, in a way. But I needed, to look at myself. And that started a pilgrimage. I had ministry. They very graciously allowed me to do some teaching and some ministry later on there. And the whole kind of way I think of ministry and view myself changed. It was as if I was turned upside down. And when that happens to you and you're near to retirement, it's quite a shock, Anyway, it all happened. And since then, I just want to say how much God has dealt with me. Digging out things, dealing with things. One of the things one of the scars in a way that came from my childhood was my father was very concerned about money and finance, and it loomed large, and everything was dominated by this. He'd been brought up in Yorkshire during the Depression, and he had reason to be like that, but it dominated. And that left a mark on me, and I was like that, and certainly money had not been easy. About 4 years ago, and I tell you this because my story hasn't finished. I'm only telling you the first chapters, it ain't finished yet. About 4 or 5 years ago, I went to a conference in London. I was early, so I went into a little garden. There's lots of little parks in London tucked away. And I went in there and sat down resting. Then I saw a great blue plaque on the wall. And I thought, I wonder what that is. So I went across there, read it. Now, it was the wall of a prison in which Charles Dickens' father was imprisoned. He was in debt, and it was in the days, beginning of the 19th century, when debtors were put in prison. And I read it and thought, that's interesting. Went to the conference, got nothing to do with this at all. 10 days later in church, the pastor puts this plaque and the inscription on the screen. Now, I don't know about the odds against that happening. They're pretty incredible. And it just spoke to me. It was as if the Lord was saying to me, look, I've shown you once, I'm showing you twice. You need to address this anxiety you have about money. And it was so powerful that the pastor said, oh, stand up next week and tell the story, which I did. And it was quite amazing, the number of people that impacted and came up to me afterwards. Now, I'm not saying that that's everything done. I am sure there's still a mighty lot to do. But the exciting thing is I'm on a journey and that I'm moving. And the incredible thing is that, that the Lord uses me in spite of all this. Now, I could go on talking. I can talk forever and ever and ever. It's one of the great qualifications you have to be a preacher, to talk. But I think perhaps I'm inclined to wrap it up there and for you to ask questions. I'm quite happy for you to ask whatever you want and see where we go from there. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. That was fantastic. That was really, really good. If there are any questions, you can go ahead and just ask them right now. I've got something I want to bring into the mix as well. I think from my perspective, as your son, hearing that, number one, it's really beautiful, and it's really beautiful for me as a son, seeing how over the years God has just opened your heart more and more. And in the opening of your heart, obviously, he's working, and we're becoming more Christ-like. We're walking as Jesus walked because of what God is actually doing in your heart. And all those, I think the thing that stuck out to me this week, Dad, when we were talking this through and just discussing it, is these specific points in our lives that seemingly at the time we might think, oh, that means nothing, or it's going to have no impact on my life or something. But there's been a number of very, very key events in your life, in your journey, in your adventure with God, that have really been like monuments, of him working and him bringing you to the place where you actually are now. I just want to share a few thoughts, and then we can just open up and we can perhaps talk together and share together. But I really, really appreciate what you shared, that it's really special. I would like to as well just add a little bit of my story to that, because I think one of the things that we very clearly see in the New Testament is sonship being revealed. Now, obviously, sonship is primarily revealed in the life of Jesus, in his relationship with the Heavenly Father, but also what we start to see as we dig a little deeper as well is not just his eternal relationship with his Heavenly Father that is spoken about a tremendous amount in John's Gospel, but also when we look in Luke, we actually look at the baptism of Jesus, and immediately after the baptism of Jesus, Luke goes through the chronology, how Jesus fits into his physical line all the way back to Adam. And what's really beautiful about that is that Jesus is not just being revealed as the Son of God, he's being revealed as the Son of Man. And his obviously his relationship with the eternal Father is extremely important, but also his relationship with where he's come from is very important. Now, I say that for this reason, is that I am always going to be the son of John. I am your son, Dad. There's nothing I can ever do to change that eternal reality. I am going to be your son. There's nothing that I can do. And one of the stories that James Jordan talks about, when he was grappling with this revelation of the Father, was God started to speak to him and ask him a very poignant but very simple question. And the question was, whose son are you? Now, the question wasn't, who's your father, or who brought you up, or who's your parents, or who's your dad? But the question is whose son are you? And as I grapple with that, I realized that there was a lot of parts from my teenage years for quite a while where I literally lost the heart of a son towards my dad. I lost my heart. It was my doing. It was my choices that I was making. It was the decision that I'd made. And in my heart, I pulled away. So I was losing the heart of a son towards my own father. At the time, I had no idea whatsoever how important that was in relationship to my own relationship with God, how that impaired that and affected that. It's all very well me rejecting or losing the heart of my heart towards my own father, but I had no idea whatsoever the implications on my relationship with God as a father to me. And Paul mentions this. Paul says this in Galatians 4 and verse 6. And this is a beautiful verse, but this verse has got two parts to it. He says, because you are sons, comma, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your heart, and the Spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. Now, the two parts of this verse are connected together, but one, I believe, is in relationship to our earthly fathers and mothers, and the other is in relationship to our revelation of God as Father and us being sons to him. But the two are not disconnected. Where I don't have harmony towards my own father, where I reject my own father, that is going to affect my relationship with God. That's going to impede that relationship. And one of the struggles that we have in really coming into the walk as sons is really our struggle in relationship with our own dads. That's really, that's at the very heart of the struggle. And one thing that I've really valued is just, and it's probably happened more this year over the lockdown than it was happening, but not to the degree, because we've had more time to get on the phone, to get on FaceTime, on Zoom together, and just listening to my dad. And I like listening to him. I like him telling me the stories. I like him telling me the good things as well as the bad things. I don't mind hearing about the struggles, but I also love hearing about, when things go well. But what that's done in my heart, there's been a responsiveness in my heart towards my own dad, and that's just brought a greater level of healing, and I think trust and intimacy actually into our relationship. And I realize now that is also reflected in my relationship with God as Father. It's knocked off some of the corners in that. It's dealt with some of the blockages actually in that relationship. And so I want to say thank you for that, Dad. But here Paul brings the two together, and because you are sons, well, my heart is back with my father. I love him. I remember the last time that I ever went out for dinner with my mum and dad, I think was in June. It was June 2016, and we went out to this beautiful Italian restaurant in Eastbourne by the harbour. And I was with Ganilla, and my mum and dad was sitting opposite. And I remember saying to them, I just thank you so much that I have the privilege of calling you my father. And I get to have the privilege of actually being your son. I remember saying that to them. At the time, we were actually doing an A school with Trevor Galping in Winchester in England. And that was that for me was a key moment. It was a key moment in my life in saying that, but I've also said it at other times as well. What's really incredibly intriguing for me from a prophetic point of view, this is my prophetic juices kind of coming into this verse. When Malachi is speaking, and I believe if you ask me what is going on in the world today, obviously there's all sorts of craziness going on, not just with the pandemic, but politically, and all sorts of shenanigans happening. But if you ask me what's really happening in the world spiritually today, I would say without a shadow of a doubt, this is one of the major things that's happening that Malachi talks about here. And these are the final utterances in the Old Testament before a 400-year silence, before John the Baptist comes on the scene. And in Malachi 4 and verse 5, it says, see, I will send you Elijah, send the prophet Elijah to you before the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And then the final verse itself says this, and he will turn the hearts of the parents to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. Now, I want to tell you a story. So I'd obviously been brought up going to church. I got baptized. I was part of the local church that my dad pastored. But there was many years when I was basically just sitting on the fence. I was doing my own thing. I was partying. I was, all sorts of things were going on. And then there came a point in my life when I really encountered God. This was 1984 at a huge mission. And the remarkable thing about this huge mission is that my dad was the one actually, the chairman of the guys that were actually organizing this huge event. Well, God did something so significant in my heart at this particular time. And things changed in my life, and within 6 months I was in YWAM at Bible school. I realized there was God wanted me to use me in missions, etc., etc. But just a few weeks before I went away to start my YWAM training, my dad and a number of the other youth from our church went from Eastbourne along the close to a place called Hastings, which is like 15, 20 miles along the coast eastward. And there was a man preaching called Colin Cuthbert. And I'm not sure if my dad remembers this or not. But anyhow, we listened to the preaching and there was worship. And then we had a ministry time, which has become very, very normal and new and in those types of meetings. And this had never, ever happened to me before. And when the ministry time was going on, I moved 2 or 3 places to where my dad was sitting. Everyone was standing up because there was worship going on. And I got to where my father was. And I remember just saying to him, "I'm so sorry, Dad," and just putting my arms around his neck and crying like a little boy. Now, I'm not sure my dad remembers that event or not, but I realize in those moments of just not only obviously God was working, in those moments of just repentance, of asking forgiveness, being very, very broken and contrite, just throwing my hands around my father and crying on his shoulder. I remember he held me. I remember he prayed for me. I remember that very, very significantly. And what is significant for me about that moment is that in that moment, my heart started to go back to my father. My heart started to go back to my father, and something radically started to change on the inside of me. Now, at that time, I had no context. I had, hadn't been from Father Heart A School, or hadn't been to Toronto, hadn't been to YWAM or nothing. It's like that was just an event that happened in my heart, an experience that I encountered. But I realized looking back now that how absolutely strategically important it was, because, Malachi talks about turning the hearts of the fathers back to the children and the hearts of the children back to the fathers. That's what was actually going on in my life actually at that point. And it was a beautiful time. Roll on a number of years later, then we go to an A school, we hear about giving our hearts back to our fathers, writing our letters to our fathers. And I know they used to do this in the school in Toronto as well, when they, obviously they're still doing that, the ministry school in Catch the Fire in Toronto. Well, roll on to, I think it was about 2017, when my daughter is in Toronto going through the School of Ministry. And it's before she actually hears this particular teaching. She hasn't heard us teach it. She's not heard it on the school she's actually at. We're in Sweden, we're living in Malmo, and she calls me. It's morning in Toronto and it's the afternoon in Sweden, and she calls me and says, "All my kids call me Papa." That's part of, because they're half Swedish, we wanted to do that. And she said, "Papa, I want to have a word with you." And, you know, when your kids say that, it's like, well, what's happened? What's gone wrong? Do you need money? You know, what's really going on here? Because that's the initial thought in your mind. You know, it's got to be about money, surely. You know, she's a missionary in a Bible school, and because I've been there myself. Well, anyhow, she gets on the phone and she says this. She says, Papa, I want to talk to you. And I want to ask you to forgive me. Now, I recognize in my life that I was not a perfect father. I absolutely know that. And I've processed that with my children. But she said to me, I want you to forgive me. And I said, why, Hannah? What's been happening? What's gone on? Has something gone wrong, or what's gone on? And I'm just listening. And this is what she said to me. She says, I have withdrawn my heart from you. I have withdrawn my heart from you. And as she's saying these words, I just got tears. She couldn't see me. I got tears in my eyes and tears coming down my cheek, because she's actually caught something in her heart that Gunilla and I were living in and working. Even Gunilla had gone back to Sweden and done the same thing with her father. And it was just so beautiful. It was so beautiful to see, because I guess I've had the privilege of seeing both ends of this. The hearts of the fathers turn to the children, the hearts of the children actually turning the fathers. And I've seen that actually just, you know, in my life from both directions. And I think, or I know, I realize and understand that our biggest struggle in our Christian walk is, who is God to us? Who is he? Now, we've all come to the conclusion that he's our savior, that is our healer, that is our provider, that is our protector. And we attribute all these attributes to God of who he is to us. But what happens when we talk about a relationship between a father and a son and a father, is it triggers the very notion, well, perhaps God really wants to be father as well. He really wants to be father as well. And I actually want to leave it there. It feels a little bit open-ended, but actually that's good. And I want to just open up. Anybody that's on Zoom right now, you may, if I can't see your face, I presume you're behind your computer somewhere and you would like to ask a question or make a comment. We've still got, or perhaps Gunilla, you'd like to interject something, I don't know. But if you'd like to say something, just wave your hand so that I can see it. So Sandra, we're going to just let you talk, Sandra. Perhaps you could unmute yourself. Okay, you're on.
Okay,
Yeah.
This is about sonship. And
Yeah.
about sonship, yeah. And about a year ago, I was out in the garden and I was out for a couple of hours and I was doing all the weeding and trimming and really enjoying myself. The sun was warm on me and I was in a state of joy and being in the present moment, in the now. I live in the now. And after about a couple of hours, I thought, well, that's enough. I'm going to tidy up. And then I heard a voice speak in my mind. And he said, that's the spirit of sonship, being in a state of joy and love. And I was looking after Father's creation, all his plants and bushes that I have. And I haven't forgotten it because it was just so lovely. And it's a connection. He was speaking to me. He was telling me the way I was feeling, that's the way to be all the time, in a state of joy and love and contentment. And really with all the old stuff, no clutter in the mind. Just let it all go and be present now.
Wow.
That's it. Could I have a word with John, please?
Yeah,
John?
yeah.
About your two plaques. You mentioned the plaque, you saw it twice.
Dad, perhaps you could unmute yourself.
Yep.
About your two plaques. You saw the same plaque twice in two different circumstances. I call that a synchronicity because I have these things a lot, and all through my life something occurs. And what happens to me is that I can be reading a word in a book, a magazine, whatever. That word I then hear on the radio or on the TV, the exact word. And that word often has a meaning for me. And last month it happened, and the word was thirst. Now, I wasn't physically thirsty. This is a spiritual thirst for wanting to know more and to go deeper. And every time it happens, it's meaningful. So that's just what I wanted to say. And the plaque was meaningful for you.
Yeah, yeah. Sandra, you talked about that feeling you had after you'd done the gardening.
Yes.
I was reflecting the other day, I spent 3 weeks in hospital, and because of the virus, you have no visitors, which is normally in hospitals. Visitors are the highlight of the week. And I was reflecting on it, and I had no sense of loneliness, no sense of anxiety. I felt I was being wonderfully looked after, and I wasn't aware of it until I was thinking about it the other day, and I thought, why, you didn't spot it at the time, John. But I think it's a similar kind of thing. Whether I'd use the word joy, I'm not sure, but it was certainly the feeling of being safe in the Father's hands.
Yes. A safety and a contentment.
Yep.
Combined.
That's right. Yeah.
Lovely.
That's great. That's really great. Somebody else, perhaps somebody else. Shannon, can you unlock your microphone?
Mm-hmm. So, John, when I was listening to you, I thought, you're right. I could listen to you all day. I just kept, every time you were sharing, my heart was so open to what you were saying. I don't know what it was. It was just really sweet. But I did have a question. What were you thinking, or what was going on in your heart when Andy was sharing the story about Hannah, and just the fact that she was coming back into sonship, but also Andy was coming back into sonship with you? Like, what was going on in your heart when he was saying that?
I don't think anything special other than just a bit of consternation, a bit of wow. I think probably it was touching me, but I don't think there's anything else. I can't remember the incident Andrew talked about. I've got no recollection of it whatsoever. And I think that was because I was a minor player and Andrew was the major player in that little drama. So, can't say more than that.
Mm.
Okay.
Wow. Kelly, you look like you're sitting on the edge of your seat about to say something. Can you take off the mic? There you go.
I'm just enjoying hearing the accents, the hearts, the smiles. And yeah, I had to move places because it was getting real dark and storming outside. So I had to come where there was more light. And so, yeah, I'm just glad to be here and soaking in all your stories, John. Thank you so much for sharing. And you too, Andy. I love the generational, overflow, the overspill from John to Andy to your daughter, and yeah. So I'm just glad to be here, seeing everybody's smiles.
That's great, Kelly. It's good to have you.
Yeah.
Good to have you. Did I see you wave your hand, Jeff? He's going to turn off his mic.
Yeah, I'm just going to say thanks a million for tonight. It's just about the best I've known. I'm deeply moved. John, I could listen to you forever. Get this boy of yours to get you back sometime.
Yeah. Yep. Well, there you go.
This boy of yours. Wow. Somebody else?
Let me just chip in one thing. I have a thing about people when they get old, and they're so often written off. They're so often kind of forgotten about. We need to remember that in old age, they're pretty near to the end. And, we ought to do all that we can to kind of offer ministry to them. I'm not saying get them by the scruff or anything like silly like that, but there's a whole host of people. And one of the blessings I've seen is a number of people who've come to the Lord when they were advanced. I think the last baptismal service I had, there were 3 people baptized. And when I got home, I jokingly said to my wife, I said, what do you think the aggregate age of those 3 may have worked out at, you see? And I mentioned the figure. Well, she put it down a little lower, but it must have been something like 75 or 70, And we just need to remember this. Old people tend to be, we stopped calling them geriatrics, thank goodness. But we just need to see this as a great opportunity. And I've got just a heart for them. And I've got a heart for young people as well.
That's great, Dad. We saw a hand from Jeffrey Haycock. Can you unmute yourself, Jeffrey?
Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Are you calling from South Dakota or North Dakota?
I'm calling from Wisconsin. I moved here from Kearney, Nebraska, and I'm moving back to Kearney in March.
Okay.
And going back to Grace Fellowship. But
Okay.
I have a comment, I guess. You brought back a memory of mine. I was adopted by my stepfather, and I gave him the hardest time ever. And he tried to be a good father, and I just wouldn't let him come close to me. And he contracted cancer. And at that time, I was in the hospital because I had a work-related accident. And we talked every day. He would call me at the hospital to see how I was doing with my therapy and all. And we had the best time trying to reconnect. And I feel like it's too late because he died of cancer. I'm finding myself strengthening my relationship with God more than ever to make him my godly father.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm getting closer every day.
Yeah. That's a really good question, Jeffrey, because that's one of the things that people ask about, certainly on the A schools that we do. And we've seen a number of instances, even though they've lost either their earthly father or their adopted father, their biological or their adopted father, even though they're not with them anymore, people have been able to give their hearts back to them. And I think what we call that is just a repentant heart. It's a repentant heart attitude that God actually works. And we have that every single time we do an A school. People ask that question. What about an adopted parent? What about a parent that's not there? And I remember this one story of a friend of mine in Sweden that was a Greek guy, and his dad was really rough with him. And he wanted to put things right with his dad. And he actually wrote his dad a letter, but his dad was long gone, buried. And we actually went to this graveyard and he wrote a letter, and he actually put it in the grave to his dad. Now, it wasn't so much the physical thing that he did, rather the heart attitude that he was changing that really was important, that I believe was a platform for just a fresh relationship for God as Father. Did you hear me, Jeffrey? Yeah, I'm not sure that we've got him. For some reason, Siri started. For some reason, Siri started to talk to me. Oh, guys, well, it's been absolutely great being on with you guys today, and I know it's gone out on Facebook. We've had a bunch of people on Facebook as well watching, and we're going to get this ready and put it out on YouTube, on our ministry's YouTube site, and you can share it around. And I'm glad I've got this on video of my dad, because that's really precious. It's going to become do you want to say something, Dad?
I just want to say that in the briefing, Andy said, you've no need to tell them your age, but look, I'll let the cat out of the bag. I'll be 90 in May. So.
Wow, that's great, Dad. We're actually going to have a party in May, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. So, yeah, thank you, Dad. But I had friends of mine comment this morning. They were asking me, how come you've got more hair than what I have?
Well, a hair grows better on a kind of fertile brain. There was a day yonks ago when Andrew and I went in a shop and they thought we were brothers, but Andrew hadn't shaved his hair off then. He hadn't become a kind of, bald-headed.
The person that said that, wasn't she blind?
No, I think she could see the value of our notes anyway. That we
That's great, Dad. It's been, we'll actually get you back on one of these Zoom calls. It's just been great, you sharing. Thank you so much. And we've had some comments come from people actually on this Zoom call just saying thank you, and they've really appreciated. So thank you so much. So we're going to produce this, actually put it on our YouTube channel. You can, Scott, perhaps you could bring that up on the screen right now. And here it comes. There's our YouTube channel. We're going to put it there, and it'll be there. There's the one from last week that Helen King and I did. And then on our Facebook page, you'll see our Facebook page. There it is. There's me, terrible shot of me right there. Anyhow, that's going to be on there, and you can like this particular Facebook page, and we put all our stuff there as well as other pictures and everything. And we have also a ministry page, which Scott's going to bring up. There it is, about the stuff that we've got going on. Also, if you'd like to make a contribution, that would be great. You actually do it right there. Just in closing, a couple of things. Firstly, that I'm going to be on with Stephen Hill on Monday. For most of you, it's going to be Monday afternoon or evening. It's going to be on at 9 p.m. UK time. That's the same time in West Africa, 9 p.m. But Stephen Hill and I are going to be on Monday. It's actually a holiday here in America. On Monday, it's President's Day. So we're going to celebrate all our 46 presidents, I guess. And that's going to be it. But next Saturday, we're back on Zoom again. And Thomas and Monica Volker, you guys know, they've actually been watching on Facebook this morning because they've got friends in their place in South Africa. They're actually going to do all the teaching. So I'm going to listen to those guys. I'm going to introduce them. And they've just got tremendous hearts that are just open. And it just, I remember hearing Thomas's and Monica's story, and I was just weeping. It's really beautiful what God's been doing in their hearts. So that's going to be next Saturday, 4 p.m. UK time, 5 p.m. Sweden, and 11 a.m. on the East Coast. So, guys, we love you. And by the way, those of you that want something to do the first week of March, we've got an A school in Myrtle Beach. We don't say anything negative about Myrtle. Myrtle is clean Myrtle, and it's Myrtle Beach, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So if you want to come in the US, we would love to have you for the week. And we know where there's good accommodation where you can stay, and we're going to be unpacking the revelation of the Father's love. Great, guys. Got to sign off now. It's just been great having you, and just have a great weekend and loads and loads of love. God bless.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Great, 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 great.